ESPN national NFL analyst Ben Solak, who's got a lot to celebrate this offseason. He's got a new baby at home, a new job. So congrats, Ben. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, man. Yeah, busy summer. Excited to see what the fall's got for me.
Yeah,
There you
so
go.
let's begin here. You recently put together a list of X factors for every NFL team, and I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here with you because the guy you picked for the Bills was Dalton Kincaid, and I'm thinking to myself, hell, this guy better be bigger than an X factor for this team. He's got to be the leading receiver. So maybe just line up your logic for us as to why Dalton Kincaid X factor for the Bills.
Yeah, when I try to do the X Factors piece, I'm always trying to highlight like non-quarterbacks and non-coaches. And in particular, I want to answer the question, if player X has a great season, then the team probably had a great season. And if player X had a bad season, then the team probably had the bad season, right? I kind of want a player who holds a lot of the team's momentum, a lot of the swings of the team in his range of outcomes. And so oftentimes that'll be like, a corner two or a left tackle or players like that. In the case of the Bills, it's pretty unique to have over 240 targets leaving the building. But that's what you have when Stephon Diggs leave and Gabriel Davis leaves via trade and via free agency. And so it creates a really a unique environment for Buffalo where, their primary target getter is going to be the X factor for this team, right? If they're going to kind of be a spread the wealth passing attack and Curtis Samuel's going to have one day and Keon Coleman's going to have another day, like that can work. That can be good for you. But we typically see postseason teams, playoff teams, championship teams have one guy who just doesn't get covered by the other guys ever. We typically see those teams have at least one dude who's a dominant pass catching threat. And I think when you go to find that player on the Bills roster, the most likely player is Kincaid. He did have a good rookie season. There's just some injury concerns, and obviously Diggs and Davis were there. But I think that as he gets routes further down the field, as he gets some more plays designed explicitly for him, I do think you can see one of those 1,000-yard receiving seasons that we hope to get from early drafted tight ends. And so for that reason, he became an X factor.
And is there any credence to the fact there may be, with Dawson Knox already in the fold, he signed his second contract. You got two pretty good, or at least you'd think starting caliber tight ends. The personnel factors, and certainly with no number one, there's no number one. So will he, is there a question that even if it goes as planned with the Bills, does he get enough targets?
Yeah, so I think that because Kincaid is so clearly, like we talk about an F tight end versus a Y tight end, he's more of that F tight end mold where he's meant to line up in the slot. He's meant to move around across the formation. Knox, obviously, like a little bit more kind of 50-50. He's going to inherently be put in that other role. He's going to be put in that Y tight end role, that inline role in this Bills offense. I think because there's space for both of them, and when you drafted Kincaid, you knew you had Knox, you knew that was a player that was on second contract that you liked. I think that we're going to be able to see those guys play the field a lot together. I think about those like late 2010s Eagles teams. If you remember Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz playing together, they had no issues, right? Get multiple tight ends on the field. They used Zach Ertz as like a stick mover underneath. He was the primary target getter for that team, kind of similar to how Dalton Kincaid was used last season. So I still think it's a lot of targets for Kincaid. I think it's very high volume. He had a crazy catch rate last season. He's going to move the sticks for them. I think if he can get a little bit more explosive, do some of the downfield, the seam running stuff we saw at Utah, that'll unlock that next level of his game. But volume-wise, I'm not too concerned. I think it'll be there for him.
And then as we get ready for the Cardinals, Zaven Collins was your choice for Arizona, the outside linebacker. I know he just signed an extension here in the offseason. What appeals to you about him? Because their defense really couldn't stop anybody last year.
Yeah, well, for the Cardinals, it's tough because, I talked about Diggs and Gabriel Davis leaving on free agency and via trade. They've had now two injuries at pass rusher, right? BJ Ojolari was going to be their starting outside backer. He goes down. I think it was an ACL tear. He's out for the season. And then Darius Robinson was their first round pick along the D-line. He's out for at least the 4 weeks on short-term IR. And so Zaven Collins now has the opportunity to, in his second year as a permanent edge, because previously he was an off-ball linebacker, just last season he switched to edge rusher, opportunity to take a step forward, generate some pass rush. They have Dennis Gardeck there as well, who's kind of your 3rd and 7 speed guy, wide 9 off the edge player, but he's not an every down player the way that Zaven Collins is. So they have to hope that Zaven takes that step forward now that he's changed positions. And obviously, Arizona has seen this work, right? We did this with Hassan Reddick there a few years back, and he had that spike season. He had that 10-sack season in his final year there, and obviously has parlayed that into a pretty good career rushing off the edge. And so I think Zaven, if he can take a step forward for them, gives them the pass rush that they're missing. You're absolutely right to say it, though. Like, this defense was not super talented last year, tried a bunch of stuff schematically, got occasional stops, but generally wasn't trustworthy. And they've added people. They have spent money. They have spent draft picks, but it's still a pretty young team. Kind of reps are available for everybody. It's just not the sort of defense that scares you just yet.
Sticking with the Bills-centric conversation about X factors, stick with the AFC East. The Jets 24. You had the X factor as Hassan Reddick. Is he going to take enough snaps to be that X factor? And I guess that's the X factor right there. Does he take the field?
When you trade for a guy to be your starting edge rusher, and then he is not in the building in late August, he becomes the X factor, right? Are we going to be able to get him in hand? Are we going to be able to get reps out of him, right? Important to remember, this Jets pass rush over the last couple of years has been so scary because of the depth, right? You had Carl Lawson rushing, and then John Franklin Myers rushing, and then Bryce Huff rushing, and then first-round pick Jermaine Johnson rushing, and then first-round pick Will McDonald rushing. Like, they just had guys on guys on guys coming off the edge. Well, they traded John Franklin Myers away, and Carl Lawson left in free agency last offseason. Bryce Huff leaves for Philadelphia this offseason. They have elected to become a little bit more thinner and more star-oriented at that position, with Jermaine Johnson on one side, and then Hassan Reddick was the plan on the other side. And if Reddick can't go, it's not going to be, or I shouldn't say can't. If Reddick elects not to go, it's not going to be as easy as it was in years past for the Jets to just call the next man up and have that guy be pretty good rushing the passer. No, they're thinner at that position than they were. Robert Saleh there, they've done a great job consistently producing elite defense. That's hard to do in the NFL year over year. We know defense to be a very fragile and finicky thing, right? Ask Bills fans about a great Sean McDermott defense for 4 or 5 years, and then a couple of injuries, and all of a sudden the walls come crashing down, right? If something collapses that Jets defensive structure this year, it'll be the lack of depth at pass rush, and particularly Hassan Reddick's absence.
Yeah. I know another piece you put together was on coaching rankings, and I kind of laughed at your preamble to the write-up saying you may have bitten off more that you could chew because there's not a lot of metrics to go off of to determine what is and what isn't good coaching or bad coaching. But you had the Bills checking in at number 12, and we should point out that you only kind of factored in offense and defense here, no special teams as far as the coaching staffs are concerned. And I think 12 is a fair number for Buffalo. How did you land there with them?
Yeah, I wanted to be higher because I have a lot of respect for Sean, and I think Sean's a good coach. And I tend, when people say, oh, teams are bad in the postseason, coaches are bad in the postseason, I tend to say, okay, we don't have a big enough sample, and, those are one-off games, and it's hard to say that. But with Sean having been in Buffalo as long as he's been, and for the AFC playoffs to have been as funneled between the Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals as it's been in kind of the last few seasons, it was tough not to dock the Bills a little bit for some of their postseason struggles. I think in particular, McDermott, even going back to those Carolina Panthers teams for which he was the defensive coordinator, Sean likes to run a line them up and play defense. Sean likes to run a, we rush 4 and we drop 7 and we play our zones, we play with integrity and we're fast and we hustle to the football. And it's great. It's good coaching. It's a good system. He knows how to coach it well. It works. Eventually you run into a Joe Burrow. Eventually you run into a Patrick Mahomes. And what we've seen in NFL defense in the last 4 or 5 years is when you run into these guys, you got to pitch them some changeups. You got to throw some weird stuff at them. You got to get risky and change the picture and try to force them to hesitate, get to a 3rd and long. And McDermott, just over his time, they're running that defense, Leslie Frazier being there for a long time, obviously Bobby Babich now. You just haven't seen the level of creativity that has worked for other defensive coordinators like Bengals DC Lou Anarumo, like Chiefs DC Steve Spagnuolo over the last few years. And so that hurt him. Like, I wanted to get him higher, but that was kind of staring me in the face and docked him a little bit. I will say, during the injury-riddled season last year, 2023, you saw the Bills try a lot more stuff defensively. They're rotating dudes and spinning safeties and getting a little bit nuts. I'm hoping that's a sign of things to come. I'm hoping with a healthy defense this year, that's still the intention, is to be a little bit more aggressive defensively, schematically on that side of the ball. So good coach, winning coach, always overexceeds his win totals, right? Undoubtedly a great regular season coach. I need some postseason success to get him up in the top 10.
Yeah, and to your point about how they did get more creative, partially out of necessity, losing Milano, losing Daquan Jones, losing Tre'Davious White to pretty much season-ending injuries last year. He employs the dime package last year with 3 safeties. It works well and mitigates the damage. I also think it's part of the reason he and Leslie Frazier parted ways, because Leslie was very conservative in, here we are, we're going to line up in nickel 96% of the time, try and beat us. I thought some of the things that Sean designed made this defense last year more of a splash play defense. They're in the top 5 in sacks at the end of the season. They're up near the top in total takeaways, and I think they want to continue in that vein with Bobby Babich.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think the splash play note is a really big note, right? It kind of felt last year like come on, this is the season where the pass rush finally figures it out. Like we could have used, we could have used some of these sacks. We could have used some of this play in seasons previous, but it was a result of longer time to throws. It was a result of more confused quarterbacks and kind of making it a little bit easier for that pass rush, which has always been a good pressure rush, to start turning some of those pressures into sacks. Sacks for the drive ending plays, sacks for the sack, are those splash plays that we're looking for. So yeah, I have cautious optimism about Bills defense 2024. Tough to ignore the departures, right? A lot of veterans out the building over the last couple of years. Matt Milano injury sucks so much. So there's red flags, but generally I would say cautiously optimistic about the Bills defense this year.
So you did take a swipe at ranking all 32 coaching staffs and coordinators and all that. Mm-hmm. There is a kind of a dark shadow hanging over the coaching industry as Bill Belichick's now in the media, but it's been widely rumored. I mean, he could almost have his pick of the NFC East of which job he would love to take over, right? Philly, if Sirianni can't get it done, Mike McCarthy, it's always a hot seat in Dallas. Washington, new ownership and a new head coach. And, the New York Giants, a team he's very familiar with and very close with ownership. So what do you think the future holds for a 70-year-old Bill Belichick?
I think he'll be back coaching next year because I think he wants the all-time wins record. And I don't think he's as good of a coach as he was in the 2000s. I think he's still a pretty doggone good one, though. And I have a very, very good Patriots defense from last season that was missing Matthew Judon, that was missing Christian Gonzalez, to prove my point. I think he's still got the fastball on the defensive side. Now, in order for Bill Belichick to coach a very winning team, a playoff caliber team in the future, I think that he needs a GM who has roster control, which is something that he has not worked with over a long time there in New England. And that GM needs to be heavily involved in the offensive coach and the offensive coordinator search, which again is not something that Belichick has engaged with during his time in New England, especially recently. And so if Belichick goes to, say, the Giants, where ownership knows him really well and they trust him, and there's probably a GM change and whatever, I imagine it's going to become the Bill Belichick-centric universe, and he's going to make the choice on roster management and personnel. He's going to make the choice on coaching staff, and I think that'll hurt him. I think he'll win fewer games because of it. If he were to go to, say, Philadelphia, where Howie Roseman is the most powerful guy there, Howie Roseman will be running that roster no matter what. I think that could be a new environment for Belichick and a challenging environment, but I think it would help him win more games faster and accordingly get that win record total. So this year off for Belichick is a very important introspection year, right? Time to reflect, sit down and journal by a lakeside for a little bit and decide what it is you really want to do. If you're going to keep coaching into your 70s, what's important to you and what are you willing to give up to get there? So I'm very interested to see Belichick back in the ranks, which I do expect in 2025.
That's a fantastic image you just put in my head. Bill Belichick journaling lakeside. Did not expect that today. So, Ben, thank you for that. As well as your insight, we appreciate it. Enjoy the season. We'll catch up with you down the line.
Thanks, Ben.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, fellas. Go Bills.